Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very warm welcome to the Al-Muslimah. My name is Sharifa Hassan, and joining me today is Nafisa Abad, a counseling psychologist with a focus in children and adolescents. And today we'll be discussing about depression in children and adolescents. And this is something that most people know, but it's a topic that so many people don't discuss about it, or we don't talk much about it. And today we want to go in depth to our topic, which is depression in children and adolescents. Karibu sana Nafisa.
Thank you.
Welcome. So Nafisa, like I said, depression in children and adolescents is something that so many people and most of us don't want to talk about it. But today I really want us to go to the core of the matter of depression in children and adolescents. So maybe we start by defining what depression is.
Okay. So I would say depression is a mental illness which is characterized under the mood disorder. So depression comes in with some feelings of sadness, emptiness, and most of the times in children and adults they have a lot of irritability, emotional swings. And when I talk of feelings of sadness, then it's not something that we maybe observe for just 2 days and say someone is depressed. It has to be for at least 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So it has to be, the symptoms have to be there for at least 2 weeks or even more. So it's something that we really observe and check on our teenagers and kids before we say someone has depression. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
maybe how can you know someone is depressed? Is it maybe the physical signs or maybe behavior-wise? How do you know this person is depressed?
There are a number of signs, I would say signs and symptoms. So when we talk of signs and symptoms, it cuts across both the physical and the emotional. So especially for children, the younger kids will come with mostly the physical symptoms, mm-hmm. which are more of regular headaches, stomach aches. But again, we have to also rule them out. They should be ruled out by a medical doctor. At least we make sure that it's not because of any physical cause. But most of the times, very young kids will come with physical symptoms. But for adolescents, teenagers, they will come with a lot of emotional symptoms. And the symptom number one is irritability. They become very irritable, very cranky. You can't talk to them. They like locking themselves. Mm. They have no friends, especially in schools and institutions. You'll be told that your child keeps to himself. They don't want to associate in sports and other activities. And the commonest, or we normally say the red sign, is the suicidability. And suicidability cuts across from planning to taking to attempting. Right. Because some would start with suicidal ideation. They will just be coming up with ideas of, oh, you know, I wish I would die, the wishing of death, and especially among our Muslim teenagers, because they know committing suicide is not allowed. So they just wish death would just happen to them. Maybe an accident would happen.
Before we go into that, because the conversation is already getting interesting, I want you to define for us who is a child, because I think this is where sometimes we get it wrong. That someone who is 24, maybe sometimes someone might say he is not or she is not a child, or a child is, you know, ni mtu wako na hii age. So I want us to get very well who is a child and who is an adolescent.
Okay. The definition of a child has been, I would say, it keeps on changing time and again. They say defining a child will depend on the society you are coming from, the culture, what the legal and the law says about who is a child and who is not. So if you talk to some communities, they would tell you a child is someone who has not been circumcised.
Yes.
And some would say a child is anyone who is below the age of 18. So when we are defining who a child is, most of the times depends on where we are. Okay. And whom are we defining to? Because when we are defining to cultural leaders, then a child will depend to, you know, whoever falls into that bracket according to their community. But legally, a child is someone who is below 18 years. Yeah. And so it ranges all along from 18 years downwards to, some say, up to 7 years, 8 years, because now we are talking about having, you know, very, very young kids in them. But when we are looking at a child in mental illness, then we look at from the age of a teenager who is below 18 years to the age of around 5 years, because we even have them having mental illnesses from as young as 3 years. Yeah, so if we'll be looking at a child in mental illness, then we'll go with the legal definition of a child. Yeah.
So a child is from the age of 1 to 18?
Yes.
I hope this is clear now. At least for me, I also learned from him. And on the same note, we were talking about, of course, the causes of depression and the different behaviors that you see as a result of the same. But what are the causes of depression in children and adolescents?
Okay. Causes of depression will also be, I would say they are general for everybody else, children and adults. So causes are categorized into 3 causes. We have biological causes, we have genetical causes, and the psychosocial causes. Biological causes are more of what happens in our brain, the chemicals that we have in our brain. So when we have imbalance of some of these chemicals, then most of the times when they are low, we get symptoms of depression. The genetical causes are now family, and we talk of the first degree relationships. If you have a close family member with a mental illness, or maybe to be specific, depression, then there is a likelihood that another member in that family would get depression.
So you can also inherit depression?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's when we talk of genetical. That means it can run in family, in a family. You could have a family, you can have in a family, you have some number of mental illnesses, including depression. Again, it doesn't have to be specifically depression. If someone has depression, another person could have another form of mental illness. But yeah, it runs in family. And when we talk of psychosocial now, it's life events, things that are happening in our life. We have some family dysfunctional families can lead to some of the children in the family to get depression, stresses in life. For teenagers, mostly it's bullying. They get bullying in schools, and some of these things that are happening, a lot of things that happen in social media, internet. They watch some traumatizing things and they keep in them, they don't share, or maybe they've witnessed some of these things and they get depressed in the process. So causes are actually categorized into those 3. So any of it can be a cause, or even the 3 of them together. You could be coming from a family of people having depression or mental illness, and then you go through some life events that are very stressful, and that can actually just make you have depression.
And in that situation of the, you know, you've inherited this depression. You know, I'm trying to think that it might be very hard. Is it that it cannot be healed, or?
No, depression can be cured. And like we said, it's a chronic illness, just like, you know, when you talk of diabetes, we talk of hypertension. These are chronic medical illnesses. Depression can also be very periodic, but again depends on when it was diagnosed and the care that you are getting at that particular time.
Right.
There are people who are living their normal lives, but again they are on management of depression. So there's so many other things that can actually either make you get well or become very severe with the depression.
So the fact that someone has inherited depression or certain mental illnesses doesn't mean that it's the end of life.
No,
they can always cure, and they can always become themselves once again.
Yes.
Wow. And on the same, maybe we've talked about the causes of depression, and you touched before you touched on the symptoms.
Yes.
But I want us to go deep into the symptoms of depression, because someone who is watching might ask themselves, so now how do I know my kid is depressed or my teenager? So what are some of the common symptoms?
Okay, among the common symptoms is one, suicidability. We always check for that. as psychologists, as mental health workers, we look for suicidability. And like I said, in suicidability, we don't just look at how many times have you attempted. We also look at plan or even the idea. Have you ever had an idea of ending your life? Have you ever thought of, killing yourself? And then you go into what have you done so far? Maybe have you done any attempts, plans? You'd hear people telling you, I carry razor blades with me every time I walk around. Or I always wish I would be knocked by a car every time I cross. So all those are just ideas of suicidability that to us it's a red flag. I know there is this myth of, most of the times they say, don't ask if someone is planning to commit suicide because it's like you're giving them ideas. If they have that idea, then they have it. You're not giving them an idea. If anything, you're actually helping them to realize that whatever they are having, the idea they are having is not because, they're bad people, it's because of the illness they are having. So it's always good to screen for suicidability. And like I said, for teenagers is irritability. You'll hear parents telling you, this child has become so rude of late, I can't talk to them. You just tell them one little thing and they, they burst and they are ready to fight. They are ready in argument and everything. So these are the things also we look at. We look at appetite. Some just don't want to eat and some eat a lot. Sleep disorders. Some just don't sleep at all. Parents tell you this kid of mine wakes up like 4 times in the middle of the night and we don't know what they're doing. They're just there. They're just moving around the house, or they oversleep. They don't want to go to school. They have no friends. There are actually a number of symptoms. There is this issue of, there's some teenagers who like listening to music. Yes. And you realize the type of music they like listening to are this sad music, the music that, they talk about life being so meaningless. All these things all together can tell you that your child is actually going into depression.
All right, we will be taking a short break, but don't go too far. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the show, and I'm with Nafisa Abad, a counseling psychologist with a focus in children and adolescents. And we are talking about matters of depression and in children and adolescents. And really, what does it mean to have a depressed kids, and how can you manage it now that it has happened? And Nafisa, before we took our break, you were explaining to us about some of the symptoms of a depressed kids, and you clearly mentioned the symptoms in depth. So now that it has happened, how can you manage depression?
Okay, like I said, depression is a mental illness. And in mental illness, there are a number of mental professionals who are handling it. So this ranges from psychiatrist to psychologist to a social worker. When you realize that your child or a teenager has mental illness, it's always good to seek some help. And I mean professional help. So among the management of depression would be one, medical, and the second one will be the psychological, and then third then we'll say it's the social part of it. So the medical now, that means the psychiatrist is going to prescribe some medication to enable the, the balance of the chemicals that we said. When they're very low, then they bring about the depression. And then the psychological now, that's where the psychologists come in. This is when now we do some therapies, and the main is the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, because most of the times they have this distorted thinking of the negativity in everything in them. Yes. Yeah, so here now the psychologists will handle that. They can do individual, they can do group therapy, they can do, family therapy in the process of helping the client. Again, now the social, now this is where you extend to the institutions and school, and the people living with these patients with depression. Now that's when you involve activities, because most of the times they are very reluctant into doing anything. So sports, aerobics, whatever activity that they used to like before, you bring it back to them and they start, you know, getting very much involved in them. Schools as well, you inform the school so that they know how to handle such kids in school, because again, when they are depressed, they don't behave like everybody else. So the teachers in the school, the management have to also come on board and you know, be part of the support that this child needs. Yeah.
And you've mentioned the issue of maybe letting other people know, the people who are around that child. But sometimes it's very hard because parents don't want their kids to be known who are depressed. So how do you handle that in terms of making sure that this kid doesn't feel like he's too delicate, that everyone else is treating them that, like, you know, you're abnormal? How do you go about that?
Among the things that we do as psychologists is we do what we call psychoeducation, giving information about the mental illness. Now, for this specific one now, depression, you let the client know what depression is, that it's an illness, it's not a weakness, and
it's normal.
It's you know, when you say it's an illness, meaning it's something that, you know, the
Curable.
same way we accept someone with a diabetes and we actually encourage them to take medication, then we expect the same when we have a mental ill person. The support that you extend to other illnesses, we want it extended to mental illnesses as well, because if this person will be taking medication, then be there to support them. Encourage them to take medication. Medications maybe have some side effects, so you should be there to encourage them. Check for all these side effects so that when they go back to the doctor, you help them, you know, in telling some of these things that is happening. Also, when we are talking of family therapy, now this is when we have the entire family. Again, psychoeducation. We let the family know about the illness that this person has, and we also want them to know their role to play in helping this client. So that's why we have therapies. When we do group therapy, we bring other teenagers on board who are also trying to, you know, to deal with the same issue of depression. So at least they realize, okay, I'm not alone. This is something that other teenagers are also dealing with. They share skills, they share ideas, and this empowers them. And by the end of the day, they live there very strong, and they live there with the knowledge, and they know how to handle themselves. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. The fact that you bring other people on board, you know, it makes you feel like you're not only the only one who is going through challenges in life, that there are challenges, but what are the coping mechanisms for me to continue? You know, this business of life is challenging. Today you solve this, tomorrow there's another problem, and so. So we've talked about how now we can manage depression, but now I want us to talk about how can we raise an emotional stable children, you know, we just to avoid the issue of having depressed kids. What is the role of parents, maybe? What is the role of society in making sure that we have mentally stable children?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Sharifa, because most of the times, like, you know, when we talked about the causes being most of the time this life events, the psychosocial causes, these are things that happen especially in our community. So you realize we have children, of course, and maybe most of the times we have absentee parents who are never there, and we leave the responsibility of raising our kids to our house helps and whoever else is in that house. We believe by us just going out and getting money, that is enough. This child does not get, you know, support from their parents. And even when they are sick, the parents are never there to support them. You know, all we do is we look at them like, you know, you talked of being weak and not being able to do anything. So that actually depresses them more. So what I encourage parents to do most of the time is respect your children, be there for them. When they are sick, reassure them that you'll be there to support them. And giving them responsibilities on some of the activities that are supposed to do. When they are teenagers, there are a number of things they can do in the house. Most of the times tunalea watoto wetu.
Tumewadekeza sana.
Yes, of course. Alafu hatutaki kuwa exposed into doing some of these things. We feel by doing that we are providing the best. But at that particular time, their minds are also growing so fast. They need to be very active. They need to be participating in a number of things in the house. So this being idle also can bring about so many ideas that, can lead into issues of mental illnesses. So parents, the community should be there to support. And support in also helping them grow. Appraise them when they do something good. Of course, there's that part of punishment when they do something bad, but we're always looking for what is wrong in them.
Always.
Always looking for what is wrong. What happens when they do something good? Do we, appreciate what they do? So these are the things that we should do in the community. It helps the kids grow mentally stable. Yeah.
And someone, if, for example, you're in a family that maybe you can see there's a lot of gaps when it comes to the children and the parent. Maybe unapata mamako, ye mwenyewe akona anger issues, you find your dad has anger issues, and in this case I'm talking about the dysfunctional families. And then there's this child in the picture. You see whatever is happening at home, it affects you. And sometimes, hakuna kitu utafanya. You can't go out of this home. There's nowhere else you can go. What are maybe some of the self-care tips to consider so that you help yourself out of this?
Okay. Yeah, then among the things we do when we are handling, when we get a case of depression is when we're doing a history, these are some of the things that come up. Maybe a child would tell you, we have issues in the house, and they would mention them, a number of issues, including parents arguing in front of the kids. So now that is when we bring the parents in and talk to them that, we understand there be issues in the family, but do not let your kids get involved in them.
Right.
When you're arguing, don't do it in front of your children. You can do it, on closed doors. And whenever you feel you can't handle, there's always, you can bring in a third person to help you handle your issues. And for the children, we also try to talk to them and let them know that, these are, when adults are dealing with their issues, you are not part of it. Because sometimes they also like to, involve themselves so much. They want to, to be part of their issues. It's not their issue. They are just kids in that family. Can they be kids for that moment and let the adult deal with their issues? Yeah.
Wow. So kids should be kids and parents should also, but you mentioned the fact that they should respect their children.
Yes.
That when you want to quarrel, go to your bedrooms. It's culturally enough for you to lock yourself in the bedrooms and, finish your argument and then come back to us when you're okay. Wow. So I think you've mentioned now the role of parents, which was supposed to be my next question. The role of parents in just making sure that their kids are mentally okay. You raise happy kids and kids who have, high self-esteem in themselves. So maybe tell us, what is the one case that you've ever handled as a counselor and you're like, oh, this is a tough one.
Okay, would you want to go into particular
children
cases?
Yes.
Yeah, but maybe just to speak about parents, I would say maybe the thing that I've observed generally in parents is how we talk to patients, to children who are depressed. The words we used, we have to be very careful. Like, we always have to be non-judgmental, because most of the times I think we have this mentality. We believe that depression is just a phase. It will go. So even as we are trying to support our kids in the process, we it's like we are telling them, don't worry, this will go. It's not here.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah, it's going to be okay. Who tells it's going to be okay? Or, I understand how you feel. You don't understand how they feel. You don't. So some of these things that we tell our kids could actually make them more depressed. You know, like, snap out of this depression. What's wrong with you? You are a grown-up. Why are you getting depressed? So we always have to choose words. We have to be very careful. Non-judgmental, verifiable behaviors. If you've noticed something, then pick that particular thing that you have observed, but do not generalize issues. Depressed patients don't like issues being generalized. Yeah. So we have to be very careful in choosing our words when we talk to them.
Okay. Parting shot, I'm told my director is telling me time is up, and I would really have loved us to continue with this, but your parting shots.
That we should treat, I think, mental illnesses with the seriousness that it deserves. And all children have a right to be happy. And whenever we notice that there is an issue with our kids, then let's be the first people to support them and help them.
So thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you've learned as much as we have. And be sure to join us on yet another episode with another Al-Muslimah. I've been your host, Sharifa Hassan. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. بأمر من سجاكين